top gear, Peugeot challenges in the executive sector with the new 605. The largest meeting of Lotus enthusiasts celebrates the genius of Colin Chapman. And the newest Lotus in the oldest British motorsports event, Against the Clock in Brighton. Hello and welcome to the International Motorcycle Show here at the National Exhibition Centre in Birmingham. We're right in the middle of the 400 bike opening cavalcade. There's a much more optimistic feel about the industry this year. For once they're reporting rising sales, up 15% over the past 12 months after the steady decline throughout the 80s. With me here also is motorcycling ace Vic Allen. He's going to be trying out some of the new bikes here that hope to cash in on that newfound optimism. Machines like this very cool Executive Express, the Honda ST 1100, cost about £7,000. Now, to buy himself 4 wheels, that same executive would have to spend 3 to 4 times that amount. And that's where we start tonight, on 4 wheels, because the French company PSA have brought out their second executive saloon of the year. We saw the Citroën XM earlier this autumn. Now Christophe has been to Chantilly to test the new Peugeot 605.
If Citroën have a name for engineering innovation, then its big brother Peugeot is known for conservatism and reliability. With the new 605, Peugeot now have a big car in the range again, a replacement for the unsuccessful 604 last produced 5 years ago. Like the 604, the new car is styled by Pininfarina, best known currently for the Alpha 164. And Peugeot weren't very happy to see how closely their car resembled the Italian. Despite that, there are strong echoes of the new Peugeot family shape, first seen with the 405. The 605 shares the same floor pan as the hatchback Citroën XM, but it's offered only as a 3-door booted saloon with no hatchback or estate versions planned. Prices in Britain should run from about £12,000 for the base model to over £23,000 for the top-of-the-range car. The new 605 range comes with a variety of engine options. There's a new 2-litre unit. It comes in 130 brake horsepower fuel-injected form, and there's also a base-level carburettor engine that develops 115. Now, both these cars run on the new 98-octane unleaded fuel. But the car that Peugeot say epitomises the 605 is the V6 version. Now, it's an engine we've seen around for a number of years now. It's the old joint Peugeot-Volvo-Renault unit. But it's been modified, and in its latest version, we've also seen it in the Citroën XM. But the engine in this car is something very different. Now, this is the high-performance SV24 version of the 605. As the name implies, it's a 4-valve per cylinder version of the V6. Now, it develops 200 brake horsepower, and Peugeot have gone for a relatively complex way of admitting the fuel-air mixture into those cylinders. There's 3 extra butterfly valves inside this inlet tract, and they open at different points in the rev range to satisfy the engine's demand. It's all controlled by a very complicated computer engine management system that has no less than 450 components, they say. As you'd expect in this top-of-the-range version, there's nice leather and wood trim. But 605 generally looks after its rear seat passengers. There's plenty of legroom and more than adequate headroom. You also get face-level vents. We saw those for the first time on the Citroën XM model. And you also get adjustable headrests in the rear. Now, this is not a 5-seater. The centre panel here is not designed to be sat on, and there's no lap strap for a 5th passenger. There is, however, a very complicated armrest that features a separate compartment, and behind it a panel that comes down with a rather obscene-looking cover for your skis when you're off to the resorts. The big Peugeots have always had comfortable seats, and the 605 is no exception. Nice to see the lumbar support control at the front here instead of having to grope around under your ribs. The instrument layout, well, that's very clear, nice black background and white numbers, and they've left the design of the dash panel and the instrument console to Pininfarina. He's chosen to put a row of fairly anonymous looking switches along here, and one of them is the emergency flashers. I'd like to see a big red obvious control for hazard warnings in today's traffic conditions. But the rest of the layout, as you'd expect, all the executive creature comforts. The radio is controlled here on a stalk, and that's something I'd like to see all manufacturers adopt with today's very complicated hi-fi systems. Despite the exotic-sounding specification, 24 valves and 200 brake horsepower, the Peugeot delivers that punch very much in a velvet glove. There's a very even spread of torque from around 1500 revs right round to almost 5000, and that delivers the power extremely smoothly. There's no feeling of a Cosworth Sierra with this car, despite the impressive performance. The ride is interesting. Peugeot have gone for electronic control of the dampers, and like the XM, there's a variety of sensors that work out if you're going to accelerate or decelerate or indulge in spirited cornering, and they automatically firm up the ride. The driver can do it independently by pressing a button on the dash, and then the difference between the rather floaty normal ride and this very stiff and rather joggly hard sport ride is very pronounced. Now, in order to get the best possible fuel economy, Peugeot's engine management system cuts the fuel supply at around about 1800 RPM on a trailing throttle. Now, when you're trying to drive smoothly at low speed through town, that can make things rather choppy for your passengers. Peugeot assure me that it only happens on this pre-production car, and that by the time 605s get to Britain in May, it'll all be sorted out. So how will the Peugeot 605 compete in what is, after all, a fiercely competitive sector of the market? There's some very competent cars in there. Rover's 800, the BMW 5 Series, the Renault 25, and the sister car, the Citroën XM. Well, Peugeot's always appealed to people who like their styling to be muted, the engineering to be conservative, but the cars to be strong and durable. Now they've got a new element in this V6 and 24-valve road rocket. Judging by this car, they've achieved just that.
For many people, this would be regarded as the star of the show. It's the new Kawasaki ZZR 1100, reputed to be the most aerodynamic of all the Japanese superbikes. For the man who has everything, Yamaha are showing their new CW50, an off-road scooter with electric start and a V-built automatic transmission. Suzuki have upgraded the specification on their GSXR sports bikes. The 750 now has a steering damper and upside-down forks. But the British bike that's been creating a stir here is the Norton F1. It's one of 3 new bikes I've been trying out on the road.
The Norton F1 is a road-going version of the racing bike that's been so successful in competition this season, winning the British Formula 1 Championship and the Shell Oil Sim 50 Super Cup Series. This factory prototype doesn't have the quality finish one can expect from the customer's bikes, but the character of the machine still shows through.
The thing most people know about the Norton is the rotary engine. But the F1 has got a brand new version. Like the Commander, it's 588cc, twin rotor, water cooled, driving through a brand new 5-speed gearbox.
The heavy-duty O-ring chain drives a 3-spoke alloy rear wheel. Rear suspension, adjustable for bump and rebound, is by a remote reservoir spring damper unit. At the front, suspension is also by white power and uses upside-down forks with adjustable damping. The big brakes are easily capable of handling the bike's performance, but still give the rider plenty of feel for road conditions. The engine output of 100 horsepower, compared with the 150 for the racer, is delivered from very low in the rave range, and it accelerates smoothly through to a maximum of 10,000. It gives sparkling performance and a top speed of 150 miles an hour. No doubt a lot of riders will buy the official conversion kit to go racing with the F1, but it's also a practical road machine for enjoyable fast touring. Around town, this prototype's low-speed mechanical noise is excessive, and the poor lock of the road racer makes it difficult to manoeuvre. But that sort of thing won't bother most buyers with nearly £13,000 to spend. The Boxer engine BMW has been with us since 1923 and has often been accused of being rather Teutonic in design and execution. With the introduction of the K1, BMW's image is about to change. It's claimed to be the world's most aerodynamic motorcycle. The fairings are designed to produce a turbulence-free airflow and a low drag coefficient. This new machine is a complete departure from the traditional touring bikes. The K1 is a development of the K series introduced in 1983 and makes no pretense to be a tourer. It is a night-and-out sports machine. The 16-valve electronically managed engine produces 100 bhp and could take you from 0 to 60 miles per hour in less than 4 seconds. And there's no need to run out of fuel mid-flight or peer into the tank to see how much unleaded there is left. And here's another nice touch. On BMW machines, the handlebar position has been criticised, but on the K1 model, the handlebar positions is absolutely perfect for the riding position. Oh, see how it feels on the road. The riding position on this sports-orientated machine is very comfortable indeed. This is like a very nice gear change. I think probably the best from BMW yet. The front forks are certainly on the stiff side compared to most BMWs. All BMWs I've ridden in the past have had the forks very, very soft, but I feel they've really got it right. I'm a little surprised that the ABS brakes haven't been fitted to this machine as standard. I'm sure that like anti-lock brakes would go a long way to convincing the buyer that this is a way to go for the future. Power comes from the 4-cylinder 850cc Reliant engine, normally fitted in the Robin. This is mated to a Motor Guzzi 850 transmission train. Centre hub steering and double wishbone suspension replace conventional telescopic forks. An adjustable Volvo seatback slides rearwards to reveal a dual seat, and for those with luggage or couriers, this is a bike with a boot. The first finger throttle control felt a little strange, and working the front brake with the other 3 fingers may not be easy.
I've never ridden one of these machines before, but I'm quite looking forward to it.
To start with, low speed stability for a normal motorcyclist, I would say the low speed stability is the hardest thing to come to terms with. I find that like normally when you go to slow speed with a normal motorcycle, it's quite easy. This one, it's got a feeling like at every movement you move with it, and that is a little bit disconcerting. Higher speeds is no problem at all, and I think it like if we got on motorway travelling, it's certainly the riding position would be very, very good indeed. It did indeed feel different. Stable and comfortable, except for the rather wide engine cowling that keeps your legs too far apart. Is the market ready for it? The theory is fine, but in practice, will the executive that it's aimed at pay almost £9,000 for the privilege of travelling feet first?
Vic Allen there with 3 of the outstanding new bikes from the show here. The Voyager, of course, being by far the most radical, therefore it has the toughest job to do in persuading people it's a good idea. Travelling feet first on a bike at high speed somehow seems unnatural. But then trying to achieve success through engineering innovation has always been a very tough road to follow. One man, of course, who knew that only too well was Colin Chapman, the founder and inspiration behind Lotus Cars, a man who was always breaking new ground. This summer at Donington, there was a gathering of some of his devotees, indeed the largest Lotus gathering ever seen. And Tom Boswell went along to join them.
This is the first event ever organised for all marques of Lotus. All 12 of the British Lotus car clubs had a hand in it. It's just a pity the Lotus company itself didn't take part. The weather outside was perfect, not that anything would have put off the 5,000 buffs from all over the world. So what's so special about Lotus?
I admired Colin Chapman and I admired his engineering skills, and he had a lot of new innovations in engineering and cars, and they've spread to road cars as well as racing cars. They have got a life of their own, these Lotuses. There are difficulties with them, but nevertheless they're nice eventually to have and own. And they're British, which is good too.
The Mark VI was their first production car proper, built in the early 50s. Originally fitted with a modified Ford Consul engine, 110 were built. No residual bits of Chapman's first Austin 7 here, though you can see where that characteristic bullnose comes from. The Mark XIV was a double first, the first fiberglass monocoque construction coupe, and for the first time Chapman gave a car a name, the Elite. This GT was launched at the 1958 Motor Show, the road-going versions being powered by the famous Coventry Climax engine. The Mark 25 was the first monocoque Grand Prix car. It set new standards in technology, dominating Formula One with Jim Clark as its driver in 1962. And I still say it's the most beautiful Lotus ever. Introduced in 1962, the Mark 26, or Elan, had a new backbone chassis and a 1588cc Ford twin-cam engine. 12,000 were made. The Europa was mid-engined with a Renault power unit. It was a GT sports car for the working classes. Great fun to drive, and it handled well, but very basic, and not all that much power or room inside. The Elan Plus 2 had a bit more room, and though the seats in the back had little real space round them, the car was more practical and opened up more markets for Lotus. Colin Chapman had come a long way since his first cars, and a few of those are still around.
This has got to be the highlight of the show. It's the oldest Lotus in existence, the Mark II. The Mark I, as far as anybody knows, doesn't exist anymore. If it does, nobody knows where it is. This was based on an Austin 7 chassis. It's got an Austin gearbox, a Ford engine, and lightweight aluminium bodywork, still the sit-up and beg style of the Austin 7, all built by Colin Chapman, in the days when motor racing for him was still a hobby. The front suspension comes again from a Ford. It's from a Ford Popular. Nigel, a fantastic find. How did you come by it?
Funnily enough, I hadn't particularly been looking for it. It just came up in a general discussion with somebody unrelated to Lotus, actually. And obviously I was interested to have a look at it. In fact, I didn't actually see it till last year because it was buried in a shed.
But it's no use just admiring your pride and joy. You've got to try it out. Well, did you ever keep all your toys in the box? Or did you play with them, show them to your friends, maybe even letting your best friend have a go? So it's on with the helmets and out onto the racetrack. Lotus were also famous for their engines. They were used in all sorts of production cars, which were often tuned up to be raced and rallied. The Lotus Cortina was perhaps the best known, with the easily recognisable Lotus logo sat square on top of the engines. Passers-by just stand and stare, and wish, and maybe dream a little of years gone by.
10 years ago, Lotus produced a special limited edition to celebrate their win in the World Championships. Just 100 cars were produced, and this weekend has provided the first opportunity for several of them to get together again, and here they are. Finished in black and gold, they're all identical, and in the same condition, it seems, as they left the showroom in 1979. Identical, that is, except for the individual special edition number on the side.
Over the weekend, it became apparent that it's not all easy going. Speculators are forcing prices up, and some less than honest are making up hybrid cars from mixtures of parts. But the rally itself was such a success that it will be held again next year.
I've been involved with off-road motorcycle sport for 25 years, and this is the most radical departure ever. Two-wheel drive motocross bike. Driving to the front wheel by 4 chains, altering the steering angle slightly, and maybe a little heavy. Does it work? We can only tell by trying it out, and we hope to do a test over the winter for the spring series.
Now, not all the show here is given over to sales figures and cutthroat competition. This particular corner is dedicated to bikes as fun, almost bikes as works of art. This stunning chrome three-wheeler, for example, was actually put together by a professional sculptor. All the bikes in this corner were lovingly put together by hand. They're all unique. They're all street legal. And that's something that can't be said about this awesome hunk of machinery here. Pure dragster, 0 to 196 miles an hour in 7.2 seconds on explosive nitromethane fuel. It burns 4 gallons to the mile. Now, as modern as it may seem, firing bikes like this, and cars for that matter, very fast in a straight line is very much a part of the British motorsport tradition, as exemplified by the famous Brighton speed trials. Tiff Needell was there.
While the Palace Pier is probably the most famous site on the Brighton seafront, its shoreline drive is steeped in motorsport history. Since 1905 they've been running speed trials here, and much the same as it was then, the spirit remains the same. All sorts of people in all sorts of cars and motorcycles racing down the seafront. Speed Trials is the oldest event still in the British motorsports calendar, and in one way it's the purest. A standing start, half-mile, straight sprint against the clock. A hill climb without the challenge of gradient or bends. David Render's been taking part regularly since the war.
When you look at the number of people that there are up here, thousands of them, it's very gratifying to think that our sport is commanding that sort of interest. You realise we're right at the bottom end, but we consider that we spawn a lot of young chaps who go on to be Grand Prix drivers. Sterling Moss was a sprinter and a hill climber in his early days.
Indeed, some of the entries date back to those early years.
Ken Neve, ex-Viers SCC president, built it just after the war, using a 1922 GN chassis and 2 1939 Ariel Square 4 motorbike engines. Does it go? When it's going, it goes. But it's getting it all going at the same time that's the trouble.
It's a 1936 Bentley. It's 4 1/4 litre. It belongs to my dad. It's exciting. Once you do it once, it's addictive, you know, so do it again and again. And you sort of lose all the fear you've got of going fast.
It's all over in 20 seconds.
Yeah, I know, but you don't forget it.
It's a Rolls-Royce built Bentley, built in 1935. And the engine is a Rolls-Royce Phantom 3, 12-cylinder.
Why is it worth spending all this effort just for 22 seconds of excitement?
It's a job to put into a couple of words. There's a certain friendship and camaraderie in the paddock, really. I think everybody just comes out and squirts their cars. There's a reason for being here.
One of the attractions of an event like Brighton is that you can compete using your ordinary road bike or car without the need for roll cages and firewalls. The original Brighton speed trial was all about timing a car over a set distance. In a way, it was the forerunner of the modern 0 to 60 seconds, which all manufacturers use as their benchmarks these days. So we thought we'd come here, bring 3 of the latest sports cars and see how we got on. We've only allowed to enter 2 in competitions. Those 2, the latest Lotus Esprit and the TVR 450 SE. Both cars claim to do 0 to 60 in about 4.7. We're going to race them. Also, demonstration runs, the very latest 911 from Porsche, the Carrera 4. We'll see how that fares. The new 3.6-litre engine in the Carrera 4 puts out 250 horsepower. But the problem with four-wheel drive is not avoiding wheel spin, but clutch slip. A best time of 22.34 seconds and 122 miles an hour across the line. The two-wheel drive lightweights were obviously going to be quicker, but harder to get off the line. The TVR boasted the most power, 320 horsepower from the 4.5-litre V8. The limited slip differential helped the traction, but too few revs bogged one run and too many spoiled the other. Still, a best of 21.17 seconds and a speed of 128 miles an hour. If the TVR is brute force, the Lotus is high-tech sophistication. Only 2.2 litres to produce 264 horsepower. That's 70% more power per litre than the other two, and, like the Porsche, running on unleaded fuel. But with no limited slip differential, it was too easy to get a lot of wheel spin, and the best of 21.31 seconds was just shy of the TVR, even though it was 2 miles an hour faster across the line. The quickest cars are all conventional modern racing cars. But don't tell James and Sue Tiller.
This is a 1950 J2 Allard, which my wife and I have owned for 30 years, and we've over the years made it go quicker and quicker. We've got a rather large high-powered engine in there at the moment, 560 horsepower, and we're hoping to do 160 miles an hour in about 3 minutes' time.
It's just so friendly and enjoyable, and it's a good experience.
Dangerous?
Very.
Everyone accepts there's an element of risk involved in motorsport, even in a relaxed and informal meeting like Brighton. Suddenly, the atmosphere can change.
Just lost it on the bumps after the finish line. It's everything. Took about 100 feet of fence out, went across in the other side.
You were okay?
Oh yeah, I got grazed elbow and I shall have seat belts marks for a few days, but we're okay.
Adrian Moores comprehensively rearranged his March 792, but was well protected himself. For the bikers, no such protection is available, as John Rich sadly found out in the afternoon. Crossing the finishing line on his 1300cc Kawasaki at around 140 miles an hour, he lost control, fell off and was severely concussed. Weeks later, he was still in a coma. His colleagues courageously continued, but the stoppage meant no second runs for bikes or cars, and hence no chance for Clive Bracey to defend his outright record. A broken clutch couldn't be repaired in time on the Vibra Mark II, and it meant Paul Edwards was favourite for the runoffs. This run by Paul's 4-litre Pilbeam MP58 was the fastest ever seen, 14.97 seconds at a terminal speed of 182 miles an hour. Paul Edwards, fantastic, a very undramatic start in a way, no wheel spin, shot off the line, new course record. How does that feel?
Well, I've been after it for about 4 years now. It's very nice to beat Clive Bracey, but it's unfortunate he can't run with us because I'm sure he'd be there or thereabouts.
Tiff Needell there reporting from Brighton, and our congratulations to him and Derek Bell for their fine 4th place in Mexico last Sunday behind the all-conquering Sauber Mercedes. That about wraps up our brief look at the International Motorcycle Show. It's nice, I must say, to see the old Enfield name back on display, catering, I'm told, for a growing market for the old-fashioned, simpler 50s-style motorbikes. Next week, we've got a road test on the new Ford XR2i and a report on the 2nd Pirelli Classic Marathon. So see you then. Until then, drive safely.